Hello guys, welcome to NEHMTECH. My name is Nehemiah and this is lesson 2 on Python. And before we begin, please consider subscribing, like the video and also share it to your friends. Now today we are going to talk about the variables, and then at the end I'll introduce the data types in Python. Now variables, these are like containers for storing data values. You can consider a water tank which is used to store water to be used perhaps in future. Likewise, variables, these are like containers to store data values to be used later. Now, let me show you the very simple way on how you can create a variable. Unlike other languages, in Python, a variable is created as soon as you assign a value to it. You know, in other languages like JavaScript, you have to use, for example, the let keyword. You have to use the var. You have to use the const if you want to define a const. Keyword, constant variable and all that. But now in Python, a variable is created as soon as you assign a value to it. For example, let's try to create here a variable called x, and then we are going to assign here a value to it. Perhaps I can give it a value like 100. So when I say print, basically we use the print function to execute a variable, like for example, if I want to get an output of a variable or maybe value of a variable, you usually use the print function. So a function in Python must have the parentheses. This is a built-in function in Python called a print, which is used to output values of the variables in the terminal, like here. So for example, if I want to get now the values of to get this 100, instead of typing here 100, I will pass here x, then it's going to get me 100. Now you could have done this way: print 100, and then it's going to still give you the result. But now the advantage of having the variables, you can store it, you can store it, and then you can reuse it later. So for example, if I try to delete this cell and then perhaps I try to again print here print x, you can see I still have the values. For example, if I try to update to 120, and then let me first of all run to store the values in this notebook, and then when I run again, you can see it is updated. So this is the advantage of having the variables. So it is just used to store values like data values. And I remember, whenever you're using the equal operator, for example, x equal 120, we are not equating, we are assigning. If you want to equate, then you could have used to equal operator to show that you are equating. But now this is assignment operator when it is used as a single variable. So I think in a summary, Python has no command for declaring a variable. A variable is created as soon as you assign a value to it. You assign a value to it. Basically here we've used a string. You can as well use the this we've used here an integer. You can as well use the string. For example, let's say name, then we assign it to Nehemiah Wekesa. Remember, if you define a strings in Python, it should have like a strings. These are word characters, any character, and numbers. Anything which is not a number is a string. So if you want to define that string, it should have the quotes. It should have the quotes. We shall talk about the data types in a few later, about the booleans. We also have other type of strings which are strings, but now they are specific. There are special data types like the boolean values and so forth, which I'm going to introduce it in a few. So this one is a variable that stores this string called Nehemiah Wekesa. So when I say print, print here name, then you're going to get the output here is Nehemiah Wekesa. So it has been used as a variable to store this name, and you can update whenever you update your values. It will still update it. Like for example, if I say Nehemiah, just remove Wekesa, then it's going to still update. So this is the advantage of working with the variables. Now let's try to do some simple calculation. For example, let's say we wanted to do some basic arithmetic here, like for example, x to be a 10, y to be 20. Then we can simply say print x plus y, x plus y. Remember, our function should have the parentheses like that, x plus y. Then we are getting is 30. So that's how you can use the variable. They're just used to store our variables in, to store values, data values. Now, if you want to specify a data type in Python, by the Python definition, you can as well do that, and that's called casting. So there's also another type of, for example, if you had an integer and then you want to convert it to a string, that's called a type conversion. But also we have casting. Casting is where you define your this way you define your data type at the definition, at the variable definition. So for example, let's say we wanted to create, let me say w, let me use w, then let me assign it to, for example, str, then for example, let me pass here 100. So the output here is going to be a string. Let me say print w. I'm going to get it is a string now. It has printed out 100, but now when I use the type function, a type function in Python is used to check the type of a data type. For example, when I say a type of, for example, okay, let me do this. Let me use another print function or print statement function. Then I'm going to use here type. Then I'm going to pass here my variable here w. You can see is going to be a string str. You can see it is now displaying str. So it means that it is a string. Let me remove this one so that it can display it well. It is now displaying the str. So this str represents the string. And then, for example, if I change it to integer, and then the output is going to be integer. For a floating number, if I use a float, the result that is going to get here is going to be a float. So when you define your variables, like you define like values to your variables, the variable definition, that's called casting. Like you want to specify the data type of a variable at the beginning, or maybe at the variable definition, it's called casting. But now let's say we had like a value, like a number, like let's say z to be 200. We know that this is an integer. When you try to print this, you are going to get here, let me pass here z. So this is an integer, but you can as well convert it to a string or whichever data type you wish. So you can use, for example, or let's say z. Okay, let me use okay, let me use a. Let me use here a, and then here let me say z, so that I may not modify a lot. So z here I'm going to say so let me say z, I'm going to say str, then I'm going to pass here a. So this is called so you can see now it is now a string. So this is what we call type conversion. So the initial part here, it was a casting. This is where you define the data type at the variable definition, and then now here you had an original data type, but now you are converting to another data type. So this is called a type conversion. I hope you've understood, and remember always to get a data type, you can use the type method to get the data type. And remember, for strings, here you can use a single, or you can use double quote, or maybe single quote, but you can use both. So if you use here a single quote at the start, also make sure that you use it at the end. So that's on strings. We'll talk about the strings later. Now also another thing about variables, I told you in the previous class that the variable is like in Python. Python is case sensitive. Like for example, if I use here capital Z is going to, sorry, let me update here to use Z, capital Z. You can see they are both Z. The difference that one is capital and then the other one is it is small. Okay, let me use something which you haven't used. I think it is trying to capture the previous. Let me use X P. Let me use something that we haven't used here. P. Then here P. Yeah, so you can see it is now displaying the error despite that we've defined here P. But because we've used here the uppercase, then this one is lowercase, so it's considered as it is displaying as it's not defined, so it is case sensitive. So make sure that whenever you are dealing with Python variables or a Python generally, just know that a Python is case sensitive. Now, before we end the lesson, I want to introduce to you the or maybe characteristics of the variables, because sometimes you might want to have multi-word, like for example in a real world scenario you won't be using A, B, C, D to define your variables. You'll be using something descriptive, like for example first name, last name, and all that. So there are some rules in Python that you need to consider, whenever you are defining your variables. So the first thing on the variable names must start with a letter or the underscore. Can only start with a letter or an underscore. Let me say my variable, my name. Okay, let me just say my variable name. First of all, let's try this way. My variable name, you can see this variable is just good. It's just good. And then let me say print, like there's no issue with it. There's no issue with it, provided you use it correctly. But the thing you realize here, it is not readable. It's not readable. Whenever you're using the multi-word, variables, then you need to consider some rules to make it much more readable. So there are some rules I'm going to explain in a few, like how you can like cases, like convention on how you can define your variables names, so that your variables may be much readable. But first of all, to reiterate on what I said earlier, that variable names must start with a letter or the underscore. Here it has begun with the letter, so it's working. But now when I introduce here an underscore, it is going to also work. But if I introduce anything apart from what I've said, the letter or an underscore, like for example introduce equal, here also equal, then it's not going to work. It's going to throw here the error, or any other special character. It's not going to work. It only accepts a character and an underscore. I mean a letter and an underscore. So that's the first rule. And then the other thing about the variable names, cannot start with the number I told you earlier, like for example 0, and then here 0. Also this one it won't allow. And the third rule, variable names can only contain alphanumeric characters and underscores, like that is A to Z, or 0 to 9, and also the underscore. Like for example, you can introduce, for example, a 0 here at the end. It will work, or anywhere between, but you cannot start with it. So this one is going to work. You can as well introduce, you can as well use the underscore anywhere. Like for example, if you are to use the snake case convention, we are going to talk about those stuff in a few. So it's going to accept the underscore like this. I forgot to remove the 0. Remember, it should match. And then If you introduce something apart from these alphanumeric and underscores, for example, introduce something like minus, hyphen. So basically, it's going to give you an error or any other special characters apart from what I mentioned, alphanumerics and underscore. Then it's not going to work. You can see it cannot assign this expression, like it only accept the alphanumeric and the underscore. Another thing about the variables I told you earlier is like it is case sensitive. I don't want to repeat that, but that's just a rule. And then another thing is that Python cannot be of any of the built-in data type. Like I can't say, like for example, we have the keywords. Like for example, let's say import. Import is a Python keyword, so you cannot use Python built-in keyword as variable names. You can't say import here. It's going to give you an error, or maybe use as then it's not going to work. Yeah, or maybe say I don't know, let me try max. So these are built-in keyword in Python. When you use it, it's going to, I don't know why it's working, but it shouldn't work. Basically, just note that you shouldn't be using the built-in keywords in Python. So those are the rules that you need to consider when working with Python. So those are the rules. But now there's some convention that you need to, for example, if you are using the multi-word variables like this one, my first variable name, you can see something like this one. Because I'm the one that I've written, I can easily read quickly. But assuming that someone is new to your code, they will not understand what this statement is about unless they take their time to check everything so that they can understand. So it is still correct, but it's not readable. Like you need to make your variables a bit descriptive so that it can be understood. So there are several conventions that you can use to make your variable more readable and user friendly. So the first thing is the camel case. Now camel case, the first word of your multi-word variable begins with small, like they are small, but now the subsequent first word begins with a capital letter. Like for example, my first, I remember the my is going to begin in small, they are all in small, but now the subsequent is going to begin with the capital, my first variable. Every initial of the name is going to begin with the capital, like to make it stand out a bit. So this is the camel case convention. So and now you can see when I try to when someone is new can easily read this code because it is more readable. Like you can see my first F has stood out, and then also V, and then V. Sorry, here should be name. It should be name. I don't know why. Yeah, name. Yeah, so basically you can see it is much more readable. So this naming convention is called the camel case. And then there's also another one called a Pascal case. Now Pascal case is similar to the camel case. Only the difference with the Pascal case is that every first letter of the word begins with a capital. So instead of this one beginning with the small, it's going to begin with the capital. So every initial of a word begins with the capital. So this is what we call the Pascal case. And in most cases, it is used when you are defining, for example, classes in Python and so forth. And then we also have another one called snake case. Snake case is you can use the small letter. For example, my first variable name. But now here you are going to use the underscore to separate words. So my underscore first underscore variable underscore name. So you can see this variable is much more readable because there are some things which separate words which you can read quite easily if you are just interacting with the new code. So this variable is much more readable. So basically these are the conventions that I wanted to show you is I try to introduce to you like the data types. The data types in Python, or rather I think for the data types, let it be for another class. I don't want to make it hard for beginners. So guys, I basically practice on the variables because this is the most fundamental part on Python, because everything will build from the variables. So make sure that you've practiced and try to attempt some. Okay, let me give you some assignments. Let me give you some assignments. For example, let me say write a variable about your first name. Create a variable that stores your first first name. Another to store last name, and print it out. So print it out. So basically, this assignment, go try to attempt this question, and once you are done, you can send me on this email. You can always send me on this email, which is info@nehmtech.com, and then as well you can post it on your Twitter handle or X. You can just post it, that assignment, and type NEHMTECH, the tags that I'll be able to access your solution. Yeah, basically your post. Use NEHMTECH as a hashtag, and also use Python. Then I'll be able to go through your tweets, and then I'll comment where possible. I'll make sure that I comment on every post. So guys, thank you so much for following. Please make sure that you subscribe, like, and share it to your friends. Until next time, this is Nehemiah. Goodbye.